Hey, hey, Life Sparkers. Welcome to our podcast today. We are here with my dear friend, Yolanda Kruger. We've known each other for about 10 years now, I figured out, which is crazy. But when I first met you, I was impressed by you, and I have watched you over the last 10 years of your life, not only raise your boys, one of whom I know very, very well, and he's amazing, but I've also watched you change your whole life in a lot of ways. But what you have done is gravitate to what is true to you. It is your true north. It is your animals. It is who you need to be around. It's the people that are in your circle. It's how you're living your everyday life. And that, my friend, is an inspiration. So, everyone, Yolanda Kruger, here she is. Tell us a little bit about, if you would, start kind of from the beginning. When we first met, you told me what your life had been up until then, and we were fast friends. Let's start there.
Which part? I always feel like
Um,
every question goes to a story. And
it
we
does.
met, I think we met, if it was 10 years ago, it was 10 years after my husband's passing. But
Yes.
there's like so much more from being raised off the grid in a tiny river community to moving to Etna, being homeless at 14, and then fast forward to when I met you 10 years post my husband's passing. So
Well, let's go back to the very, very beginning of living downriver. Let's start there because it really does. I think that the value of that for everyone to know is you don't have to have like some special recipe to make it in life. You have to decide and you've got to find the grit inside yourself. And that's what I love about you. So let's start there.
So in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like I've always had a still small voice in my head, and it could be God. It could be I believe that everything holds hands for the better, and that switch in my faith came when my husband committed suicide. So way back up to the beginning, my parents were Hell's Angels in the Bay Area. And my dad passed away when he was 24. He was killed in a motorcycle accident, and I was 6. And at that time, my mom got together with one of the story that I have and that I believe from what I've put together from my different parts of my family is my mom got together with a drug runner. He was in the club, but he wasn't a Hell's Angels. He was a drug runner. And they carted us off to a tiny little river community called Salmon River. And I think that man was hiding my mom and my brother and I at the time, because it was late in the 70s. And so we lived there, and it was very rough upbringing, off the grid. We squatted a mining claim. So we claim jumped essentially and moved into a cabin that had no water, no power. It was just kind of a shell, and we lived there for shelter. And then when I was high school age, there was no high school on the river. There was 18 kids from kindergarten to 8th grade. I was the whole 7th grade class and one of 2 people in 8th grade. And then my mom, we had to go to Etna, which I know you're familiar with, to go to high school. And my mom kind of just left me on somebody's couch and said, good luck in high school. And 2 weeks into high school, the old man that I was staying with said, I'm moving, you have to find a place to live. And I was completely homeless. So I just, you can call it luck or God, blessings from above. This senior boy came up to me at the lunch table one day and said, you look sad. And I was like, well, I'm homeless. And he said, well, let me introduce you to the Sewards, Wendell and Maryland. They live in Etna. They usually have foreign exchange students, but they don't have any this year. So there's lots more to those stories, but that's where I ended up. And their rule was I had to interview to live with them. And their rule was you have to go to Sunday school because it's in our living room, and you have to go to church. And in that, I found a peace. And it was a small voice inside of me that when everything was turned upside down, because my childhood was very chaotic, there's a lot more to the story. And it included drugs and sex and all the things. But inside, I always felt like you're going to be okay. Like I always had this voice that said you were going to be okay. And intrinsically, even as a little girl, I felt like you're made for more. That voice kept saying you're made for more. So I just kind of hung on to that. And then through high school, which was a tough time, I lived with 5 or 6 different families, graduated from high school, worked for the Forest Service, I went to San Diego for a couple of years and went to school to be a paramedic, and then went back to Etna and married my husband, who was in law enforcement. And finally, I had gotten to that place I was a correctional officer at the time. That's how I met him for Siskiyou County. So I'd gotten to that place where, like, okay, I've learned about God. I know he wants the best for us. I believe in Jesus Christ as my savior. I feel like everything's going good. My husband was my peace. He was my safe place. He was 10 years older than me. We had children together, and I loved being married. I never didn't want to be married. And I felt like life was going really well. Finally, you know, we owned a house. We had 3 beautiful boys. Everything was great. And I went to a business conference in San Francisco. And when I came home, he had been working for the sheriff as a campaign manager at the time. And they had a dinner the Saturday night I was gone, and I had hired a 16-year-old babysitter. And from what I understand, she asked to stay while I was out of town, and something happened between the two of them. And the Sunday when I got home from the business conference, her parents had pressed statutory rape charges and some other rape charges against my husband, and he fled the state and committed suicide. So I met you 10 years post that. And what I did after that, and it was a horrific incident. I was very good in real estate in our small town, and he was a very well-known detective, crisis hostage negotiator, sheriff's campaign manager, supervisor for the district's campaign manager at the time. And for that scandal to unfold, we were front and center. And what I felt about it was someone just kicked my front door in and let a bomb off right in my face. And the part of losing my faith was I felt like, if God wanted all these good things for me, why did that happen? Why did he allow, you know, I finally pulled myself up out of the homeless, horrible upbringing, sexual abuse, child abuse, all the things. Being homeless at 14, I finally made it, was successful, had a great real estate business. He was in the sheriff's department. Everything was going great. And then all of a sudden, the carpet gets ripped out from under you again. So you're like, okay, God, why? What does this mean? Why are you doing this to me? So I had to learn a lot of lessons. I packed up my kids and I moved to Arizona, which is where I am currently. And for me, I got into a couple of long-term terrible relationships with narcissistic type abusive men. And what I learned, I think my biggest regret in that is what I put my children through. But we learned a lot about ourselves. I learned a lot. I came from a small town and went to North Phoenix, where I didn't know that people could actually be like that. Like, you know, even though my husband was our protector and our provider, he was our safe place, regardless of how it ended. So there was a lot I didn't know. I moved to Arizona and met people and trusted people, and it was completely naive and got into relationships that I shouldn't have. And then when I was 2014, I moved back to Siskiyou County, and I believe that's shortly thereafter we met. Started my real estate business again, reinvented myself, finished raising the boys there, and did a turn. We lived in a subdivision in Arizona, and I rented that house out with my real estate background, got my license in Arizona, rented that house out, moved back to Northern California, and we decided we wanted to be cowboys. Like, we wanted horses, we wanted a team rope. My 2 boys wanted a high school rodeo. So that's what we did. We reinvented ourselves. And I think in that whole process, we all learned how to put ourselves first, how that female friendships are the most important, one way or the other. And I kind of see it sometimes manifesting itself in my boys, this lack of like belonging, because I was an orphan pretty much. So I felt like I had to be tied to someone to be tethered down, like to be known, to be part of something bigger. I had to be tied to another human. And I learned that that's not correct. That's not right. Like, you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And a lot of faith.
When did you get your faith back?
It's been a process. So I started digging in. So one of the boys that I dated out in Arizona, lived with for 5 years, one of his wives was it sounds great. He had 3 wives. One of them was not at the same time, but one of them was she called herself a Wiccan. So what I learned from her was a lot about the spiritual realm. Like she said, I'm a white witch, which I didn't even know what that was. But I learned a
Right.
lot about the spiritual realm and sitting quiet and listening. And she was really the first person. She would come and stay with us because she traveled a lot. And she actually wound up leaving her 12-year-old son in our care, my care, because she felt like we were a more stable environment than she was. And
Mhm.
he's a great boy. And I still follow her on Facebook. She's pretty well known and doing very well with what she does, personal
Mhm.
coaching, and she does some ghost hunting. She does a few more things than that, but um, she was the first one to teach me that you have to listen to your voice, like being quiet. And we took a trip up to, I think we were in, there's a ghost town up here called Jerome. And we took
Yep.
our boys up to Jerome, just her and I, and she taught me to be still and listen and feel. And she
Mhm.
was my first encounter with feeling the energies of things. So then I started digging into that and doing a little bit more research. And then just over time, it's been, I would have to say, the little miracles. You know, when you look, have you heard about glimmers?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd start looking for the glimmers, which are the good
Yes.
things and the little
Yes.
miracles and the coincidences, which aren't really
Mhm.
coincidences.
Nope.
And then it just all came together like being barefoot in the earth, like learning about earthing, learning about crystals, learning about herbs, learning about clean eating.
Mhm.
And I had to dig into clean eating very hard because 4 years ago now, in 2021, I was diagnosed with kidney and bladder cancer. So they
Mhm.
took out my left kidney, and I knew that I wanted to use some of modern medicine, but not all of it. So I started digging into, actually, the first movie that I watched was called Heal, and it was on Netflix at the time.
Mhm.
And it talked about meditation and spiritual awareness and your faith as a Christian. And that combined with medicinal, holistic, healthy foods, and then your faith in God, getting back to
Right.
your faith in God. So it's been a return probably in the last 5 years of just trusting. And I found a
Mhm.
church here in Wickenburg, and he did a series that was phenomenal while I was fighting cancer. It was called Unleashed Faith. So I
Mhm.
started following that, and recently I've started re-listening to it on the website, just having blind faith. So
Yep.
my I talk to a lot of people about, yes, I believe in God, but I also believe that there's more things that hold hands with that.
Right.
There's a bigger picture,
Right.
and we have to have a little more. I don't like to call myself a Christian because I feel like Christianity is kind of a label that is closed-minded, and you talk about being part of the church that you grew up in,
Mhm.
a strict, what do you call it?
2x2 church.
Yeah. So it's like,
High
I don't,
control. I call it a
yeah,
high control religion. Yes.
yeah. And one of my aunts when I was growing up was Pentecostal. So
Mhm.
they were very like, you wear skirts, you don't wear makeup, you never cut your hair. Like they have all these rules. And I thought that can't be the way that God designs it. I mean, look at all the things he creates, and when you get out there, how you light up, and
Mhm.
just walking, like when the birds come to you, or like I'll
Mhm.
go for a hike and sit in the canyon and I can hear the cactus wren calling across each other for miles across the canyon, and I
Mhm.
think they don't have the rules that man has imposed on us,
Exactly.
you know.
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's so much unseen. Like you believe
Mhm.
in a God that's unseen. You know Jesus Christ walked this earth to make people better people. There's more unseen things. And God, in the Bible talks about miracles, it talks about meditation, it talks about spirituality.
Mhm.
It all holds hands. I believe that it
Yes.
all holds hands. So
I
there's
do
there's
too.
more, so much more than just a Christian label or a Pentecostal label or a high control, whatever
Yep.
label. So, and
I call God, I say God is the grand overall designer of it all. That's like the how I describe God for me. And I'm like, I don't have limits on him anymore. There are no limits to the galaxies, the quantum, the whatever it is. Like it's to me, it's just this huge that we have just begun to understand.
I don't believe there ever is going to be human understanding
I don't
of
either.
there's so many things that we don't see that we can feel
Yes.
that make me excited about having a faith again. And I do
Yes.
believe that he has the best in mind for us, but we also have free will. And that free will is what makes the U-turn.
Amen, girl. This is why we're friends and still friends. Um, yes. Yes, to all of the above. We are definitely on the same page with that. And I agree with every word. I'm not going to repeat any of it because I agree with literally every single word, and the limits and the boxes that that people like to put on things, that is not my belief system at all.
It
So,
isn't mine either. So I still go to church because I feel like there's
yeah.
good things that you can feel. Like church
Yes.
is a good influence. Sometimes I
Right.
do not agree with what the pastor has to say. I think he's extremely brilliant, and at any time I could sit down and have a intelligent conversation with him.
Yeah.
And there have been times in his sermon where I'm like, oh, I can argue
Yeah.
that. But when you walk away at the end of the day, the music, the community, the
Yes.
camaraderie, just the connection that you get from being there.
Yes.
And there's quiet times. I actually take my journal. So sometimes when he's talking, I'll just start journaling and journaling and journaling and journaling because there's things that come into my head while I'm listening to that I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
this is what I've got to iron this out and discuss
Right.
this.
And I think that's the Holy Spirit. I think that is what connects us. That is how you and I can go for 3 years or however long it's been and not talk or see one another, but there is zero blip in our connection because there is a spirit between us that we both understand. And that's what I call it anyway. So, and I wish that for everyone. Like, I truly, that to get to that level of understanding and trust and faith, that is the ultimate goal, I think, for us here on earth. For myself anyway, I just think that coming to that trust and to that submission of there is something bigger than me, it takes you out of ego, and that's ultimately the goal, and that's where magic happens.
I
But
agree.
yeah. Okay, my dear. So, Faith, your husband took his life. You had 3 boys to raise. I think boy moms have their own special place in heaven. Um, because there's so much to it. And I always say you can tell a lot about a person by their kids or by the people closest to them. You have 3 incredible stand-up men for children.
Thank you.
Um, and that did not just happen with everything that happened to your family. So I really want to give you kudos there. We'll
Well,
have to talk some.
you know my youngest, and for you to say that after you know him. He's a great kid. He just marches to his own drum. And
He
I always
does.
kind of excuse, and I think what I admire about you and I appreciate so much is that you see him in a different light than most people that see him, and you understand. I don't know what part of his story that he told you, but in the midst of this raising 3 crazy boys and rebellious teenager, and I say 1,000 times over, I will have a room full of toddlers before I will have 3 teenagers again. It was one of the hardest experiences in single momhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not having a man in the house or a dependable, good example man in the house and being mom and dad to them. There's
Right.
something that boys need from a man that they cannot get from a single mom. And I'm sure it goes the same for if there's a single dad and he's raising a daughter, I'm sure it's the same. But there's no accountability to how they treat their mom, and I'm not saying that it was always bad, but it was a challenge. It was a huge challenge for me to walk that line and be able to point them in the right direction without being too heavy-handed or being too empathetic to the point where they could walk on me.
Right.
So we were in the huge throes of high school rodeo. And my middle son is a calf tire and team roper, which he still does with me today. I started a business in Arizona, which is a 9-acre, 12 spot RV camp with 33 horse stalls, I think we have. And so we're in the middle of season. So he was doing really good at team roping and calf tying. And we were at the high school rodeos all the time. And my youngest, who Will, I said, you need to pick a sport. Like, you need to pick an event, because we're going to rodeos all the time, and I don't want you to kick rocks. You're talented. You're very athletic. Your friends want to play with you. So pick an event. So he picked bull riding, of course.
Yep.
He kind of had, his high school years were very unorthodox. His freshman year, he got in trouble, so I put him on independent study. His sophomore year, I think, is when COVID hit. So he was out for a year between his sophomore and junior year. And when COVID hit, he was number one in our district for bull riding, and he was supposed to go to the state finals. Well, they decided to do a draw in our district instead of just taking the number one kids from each district in the state of California. They did a draw. Well, Will didn't make the draw. So we decided to go to the first losers rodeo in Winnemucca, Nevada, which is called Silver State. And there he didn't get bucked off. He hit the ground wrong when he bucked off his bull, and it rattled the two sides of his brain separately. So he wound up having a stroke, essentially in the communication center of his brain, and he was in a coma for 4 days. And when we got home, he walked like he was drunk. And at this point, Alex had already graduated from high school, so it was just me and Will at the house. And he had lapses in his speech. He walked like he was drunk. He had a complete disconnect. And it made him a little strange. And we're 4 or 5 years out of it now, but his thinking is different. And the part of it that I feel like is a total miracle, he was always a C student, like average. And I used to say, your charm and your charisma is going to take you far. You'll be a movie star, so don't worry, just pass school. Well, after post-head injury, he was getting all A's and B's. And while he was in college, he graduated from college with an AA degree. I got a letter from the college, and I was like, great, he's in trouble again. What are we going to do? Like, he's probably got expelled. And I opened the letter, and it said he was on the dean's list for graduation. And I was like, I called his girlfriend right away, and I was like, hey, have you been doing Will's homework? And she was like, no, he did it all himself. So in a way, it helped him, like, retain information and be smarter, but he's different to understand. So for you to see that light in him and to hold him in a high regard is absolutely amazing, and I appreciate you for that.
I feel like he just has magic in him. I don't know how to explain it. He has it. He's always had it. Before the accident and since. He's just got magic. And again, part of that, I don't know where that comes from, but I do know that the way that you have loved him and fostered him and let him be him, even at a great cost to you, I know a lot of times, is the greatest gift that you could give. Like, you didn't put him in a box. And I think that that's one thing you and I have in common in so many areas of our life is we don't like being put in a box. We don't like being compartmentalized. We don't like having a label on our forehead. You do that to us, and I really think that the average person is more like us. They're just not confident enough to say, please don't. Like, I'm not all that. I am all that and all this. Like I often say, you can be strong and vulnerable at the same time.
Yeah.
And they look at me like I've got 3 heads. No, you can be both. But yeah, and I feel like you have grit. You gave grit to your kids. Part of that I'm sure came from experience, but that steady grit that you have is determination in spades. And
I think the one thing that always blows people away, and this is what I bring them back to, like, I was raised knowing that I wasn't wanted. My parents were teenagers. They didn't want me. And I considered myself, when I got to high school, a throwaway child. I wasn't related to any of the ranchers. I wasn't anybody. There was no consequences for picking on me or labeling me or calling me a rat, or I was bullied to the point where I went to a different high school my junior year. And I never felt like I fit in. So I didn't have any confidence. And there's still times where I'm like, yeah, this doesn't feel like my scene. But now that I'm older and a little bit more, I would say educated, it's like, it's okay for it not to be my scene. but the wicked lack of confidence, the body dysmorphia, the I'm strange looking. I mean, I was a sophomore in high school and the kids pushed me out on Senior Square and then shoved me down a storm drain and pulled a picnic table on top of it. And I had to wait for the janitor to find me to get me out. And I tell people stories like that all the time and they're like, "What? You? No way." I'm like, "Absolutely." There, I would attribute a lot of the confidence building to coaching. I've been in a lot of coaching. I've probably been in and out of counseling for the last 20 years since my husband passed away. And there's been times where I've taken breaks from it and then learning how to rewire your brain and your self talk, learning how to subconsciously change your inner dialogue. That's been a huge one for me that built the self-esteem. And it's something that I preach to my kids constantly. And when they say, "Oh, I'm terrible at this," or "I can't do that," and I say, "Well, if you think you can't, then you can't. You're right. Either way. If you think you can, then you can." And I just kind of, now that they're adults, I just kindly, gently, I listen to them speak. And like Alex, the 24-year-old, still lives with me here. He has his own trailer, but we're still in the same space, and he'll come across and say something and I'll just listen and then I'll say, "Well, what do you think?" Well, whatever you think is the truth. So you have to learn how to retrain your brain, very much so. I listen to a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of him?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then my real estate coaching that I went through was the Brian Buffini company. And I had a coach for a long time there. And they don't only business coach you, they coach you through life. And I still off and on have a counselor that I talk to just to be accountable, to check in with, okay, these were my thoughts in the last 30 days. Am I seeing this right? Am I making strides in the right direction, or am I going backwards? Like, just to have an accountability partner with
Right.
my internal dialogue.
Right. So I want to say a few things and recap what I've heard you just say. First of all, you started out with in this conversation about listening. Learning to listen is one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself and anybody that you care about in the world. Truly. So we can have a whole other conversation about that sometime. But listening, boom, huge. What I just heard you say is accountability, owning your shit, and truth telling. That's what I heard when you just said that. And that's one thing that I have always appreciated about you. Things are not always perfect and things are not always hunky dory, but you get straight to the chase. Like, I need help. You are coachable. Being coachable is, again, so some people say, "Oh, I got it all figured out." That's the difference between living in ego and living in confidence. And there is a dramatic difference between those two things. And I have watched you move into confidence in so many huge ways that you are literally grounded. That level of authenticity that you have and that you lead with and that you live with is like, that is your magnetism. That is the gift that you are giving your children and anybody that's lucky enough to be in your space, because you are you. We know we can count on Yolanda's going to show up being Yolanda, not who I wonder who's going to come today, When I look forward to seeing you or talking to you or anything, I know you are going to be the best version of yourself, or you're going to say, "You know what? I'm really struggling in this area. Can we talk about it?" Because you're coachable. And that's huge, my friend. Huge, huge, huge. I love you so much for that. We are already out of time on this episode. So we are going to shut this one down. So for those of you listening, the next episode with Yolanda is coming right up.
Thank you, Crystal.